Good evening and welcome to ABN's Jihad Watch program. I'm Robert Spencer, and tonight, for the first time on this still very new program, we're not actually having a debate, although I'm still, of course, always happy to debate any Muslims who dare to debate me here or elsewhere. In any case, tonight we have a very special guest who I will introduce in a moment. The topic tonight is Islamophobia. Islamophobia is a word you've probably heard of, and it points to a particular problem in today's public discourse. It used to be in the United States in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s even that there were various issues that people of differing perspectives had different views about, and they would debate these issues in the public square in an atmosphere of mutual respect. That's pretty much gone out the window nowadays, and one of the things that has changed is that now on the left and the right, loosely speaking, in the American public square, there are two radically different views of reality. And one would say that, and obviously this is a view that I share, that Islamic jihad and Islamic supremacism, the attempts to bring Islamic law to the West, these are very serious problems that free people in the United States and elsewhere need to be aware of and need to combat. But the other side, very much on the political left, and also, of course, among Muslims in the United States, says that this problem has been tremendously exaggerated, that there really is no significant jihad threat, and that the real problem is what they call Islamophobia. And so tonight, I'm very happy, as one of the nation's leading Islamophobes myself, to bring on probably the nation's most prominent Islamophobe, my friend and colleague Pamela Geller, who is joining us on Skype tonight. Pamela, are you there?
I am here.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight. As you know, we're discussing Islamophobia, and I thought that I would read a recent article that was written actually just last week by Ekmeladin Ihsanolu, who is the Secretary General of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which is 57 Muslim governments around the world, the largest voting bloc at the United Nations. And Ekmeladin Ihsanolu, in this article, he said, Muslims with a real understanding of their religion believe that the word and the essence of Islam emanate and preach peace, compassion, tolerance of all religions and beliefs, and respect for humanity and human dignity. These have been, he says, the fundamental principles of Islam since the Prophet Muhammad first spread its message over 14 centuries ago. Then he goes on to speak about Islam's alleged contributions to humanity, and then he says this, unfortunately, due to the rise of Islamophobia, mainly in the West, Muslims nowadays are facing various types of discriminatory acts, particularly by extremists and racists who irrationally equate Islam with terrorism based on false premises and assumptions. Now, I expect that Ekmeladin Ihsanolu had you in mind when he said these things, and people who you work with, probably me as well. And so, unlike the mainstream media, where only one side of the story is ever presented nowadays, and we don't get a fair hearing, we're going to have some time tonight to discuss this in depth. And so my first question to you is, how would you respond to Ihsanolu's charge that it is there's a rise in an irrational hatred of Muslims in the West, causing Muslims to be faced with discrimination, and that it's irrational to equate Islam with terrorism?
It must be a difficult intellectual gymnastic activity for the great Secretary General when his calling of the truth a false premise. It's amusing to me because really, on its face, it's easy to see that Islamophobia is nothing more than a device in which Islamic supremacists can enforce the Sharia, can enforce the blasphemy laws under the Sharia. I merely report on jihad, on Islamic supremacism, on the subjugation and oppression of non-Muslims in Muslim countries. I've yet to see anywhere or anything that even remotely speaks to what he's accusing us of. But I can certainly point to hundreds of thousands of victims of the Sharia in Muslim countries under these laws, clearly the last thing that, or I should say, the only thing standing in the way of their mission, which is to impose the Sharia, is the truth. And so you must kill the messenger. In this case, that would be me, and that would be you, and anyone else that dares to, uh, one might say, it's a fool's errand
Yes.
to engage in this. Because look, we are on a daily basis. Now, I can't speak for you, Mr. Spencer, though sometimes I do try. Um, on a daily basis, we are smeared and we are marginalized and we are rendered radioactive. And what do we do? I know Jihad Watch does a spectacular job of reporting on jihad across the world. And of course, I do that as well as report on the encroaching Islamization of the, whether it's the marketplace, whether it's the school, whether it's the workplace, Islamization in America. And
Well, you know, it's a very important point you make about Sharia. And maybe we should expand on that just a bit and note for those who may not be aware that Islamic law, Sharia, actually forbids non-Muslims to speak critically about Islam or Allah or the Quran or Muhammad. This is actually something that brings the penalty of death if they do this, particularly the dhimmis, the so-called protected people in Islam who are the non-Muslims, the Jews and the Christians who have submitted to Islamic rule. Now, the interesting thing about this is that the things that are said don't have to be false. That the definition of slander in Islamic law is not telling lies about somebody else, but telling truths about somebody else that they don't want known. And so, would you say that the whole Islamophobia project, the whole idea of the concept of Islamophobia itself, is an attempt to enforce just that kind of restriction upon non-Muslims in the West?
But it is. You know, on page 74 of my marvelous book, Stop the Islamization of America, A Practical Guide to the Resistance. Seriously, though. I explain how that word even came to be. It was invented according to Abdul Rahman, who was a prominent scholar at the Islamic Institute of Islamic Thought. He said he was present in the, quote, bowels of Muslim think tanks, where it was invented as a thought-crushing device, as a device to silence critics of Islam. And clearly it is, because this is what we're witnessing in the West. Anybody that speaks critically, candidly, about Islam is labeled a racist, Islamophobic, anti-Muslim bigot. And some people think they can do it to a point. Some people think let's couch it a certain way, which is, again, you try and couch the truth, or you try and frame the truth, or you try and soften the truth. You're adhering to the Sharia. But even they think that they'll be safe if they just, sort of frame it in an unoffensive way. Look, the truth is the truth is the truth. And, you have to be able to speak. And it shocks me here in the States that not only is this happening after 9/11, if you told me, Robert, that after 9/11, that we would be fighting for freedom, and we were the ones that were being marginalized, and we were the ones that were, rendered radioactive, I would have looked at you like you were nuts. So it's obviously a very effective, technique, which, by the way, has been adopted by the media and by the weak, feckless politicians we elected. And it's maybe because of white liberal guilt. I honestly believe the left loves control. The left, every single totalitarian ideology of the day, whether it was, National Socialism, Workers' Party, the Nazis, Stalinism, it's all about controlling the people. So essentially the battle is individualism versus collectivism. And my fear is that our children have not been taught about the founding principles of this country, why it is so unique, why it is so exceptional, why men of great wealth and name, risked everything for this idea, that was unprecedented in human history of individual rights. I don't know if our young people understand America, because this is the battle. There is no unique soul in Islam. There is no individualism in Islam. It's collectivism. And so it's the shape of, it's wearing the cloak of religion, which
Would
makes
you
it
say
what?
that that's why the left allies so much with Islamic supremacists and jihadists?
Yes, because they want to control the people.
Yes.
Now, they are obviously confident that once, the mission has been achieved, that they'll be able to win the day and shunt the, Islamic supremacists and the jihadists aside. They obviously have not read history. They obviously are unaware of the 1400-year history of jihadi wars, land appropriations, cultural annihilations, and enslavements resulting in the deaths of at least 270 million victims. So
Indeed.
that's what I believe it is, sir.
Well, the International Institute of Islamic Thought, as you noted, is a Muslim Brotherhood organization. And Abdurrahman Muhammad, who you mentioned before, who says that the idea of Islamophobia was actually cooked up in the IIIT in order to stifle criticism of Islam. It's really kind of extraordinary that this invented word, this neologism, this coinage, could have gained so much traction in the mainstream media, such that now it's just taken for granted. And of course, you and I and others are called Islamophobic as if it's just an ordinary term to be calling us like Republican or Democrat or whatever else. And what do you think the mainstream media is doing in so completely buying into this narrative without any critical thought on it whatsoever?
Robert, do you really find it so astounding? Let's take a step back for a second, shall we?
All right.
Thank you. President Obama is in the White House. Is there anyone more unqualified, more dangerous, more feckless, more reckless? I mean, my book, The Post American Presidency, the Obama Administration's War on America, warns of the nefarious alliances, friendship, allegiances that this man had. He has not been vetted. The missing record, so as they demand from Romney, his 2009 tax returns. I mean, this man, I did a very interesting piece for the American Thinker today on the passport breach and the murder of the key witness of the passport breach of his passport that he traveled to Pakistan on in 1981, when we know that there was, what was there to be gotten in Pakistan in 81, but, jihad or drugs. His missing college transcripts, his missing college thesis, his medical records, which he's never released. I mean, we can go on, and I know this is not the Obama show, but it is relevant because this is how powerful the influence of the mainstream media is on the dissemination of news and information. They have ceased their responsibility as public servant in this in the dissemination of news, and they have become an activist organization. So they become an activist organization for Islam. Could you say that the media is an activist organization for, say, Christianity or Hinduism or Buddhism or, Israel? Hardly. So we, as a people, as individuals, must understand what's happening. We must understand why it's happening, and we must fight it. We must fight it with every breath in our body. The mainstream media is completely responsible. Do you really believe the mainstream media was not Sharia compliant? And they are. They will not offend Islam. They will not criticize Islam. That we be seeing the kind of a galloping Islamization, not only in America, but whole entire swaths of continents. Countries are falling to Islamic supremacists in a period, as short a period as Obama's presidency. So my answer to your question is yes, I hold mainstream media completely and utterly responsible.
It's interesting to note that when I was very young and I would see Walter Cronkite and Harry Reasoner and those guys on the television news networks, they were all certainly biased toward the left, but they, at the same time, at least tried to keep the appearance of giving both sides a fair hearing. And there was some semblance of an attempt at objectivity, even if it was already compromised to a tremendous degree even at that time. But nowadays, it does seem as if the mainstream media has a very particular political agenda, a very particular cultural and societal agenda, of which this whole Islamophobia idea is a part. And one of the things that they're trying to do is to completely discredit their opposition. They no longer have the idea, if they ever really did, of two completely legitimate differing points of view that deserved a fair hearing so that the American people could make up their minds in a sober time of reflection by considering the arguments from both sides. That idea is completely gone. Now they are intent, it seems, on discrediting and completely destroying the political opposition to Obama, to the Democratic Party agenda, and that part of that also is to discredit any counter-jihad voice. And so I believe that's also been your experience. Can you relate some of the things that have happened in that line as you have gone about your own work?
Well, I'd like to just address something that you said. They never had any opposition. There were three channels: ABC, NBC, CBS, and PBS. And this has been a long, hard slog for them. Understand where they were coming from. You know, if you recall during World War II, the government actually had a War Department that made films. And they made films by the greatest, most talented, most brilliant talent in Hollywood. Frank Capra and Ford. And I mean, you should watch these films. They're amazing, and they're completely and utterly in love with America. So you're going from that to completely and utterly in hate with America. And that didn't happen overnight. And as I said, it was a process. It was a long process. And Walter Cronkite and Harry Reasoner and so on, there was no opposition. And with the advent of, at first, of course, Rush, who must get his due, and then the blogosphere, the right was first to the blogosphere. Of course, we lost our steam when the establishment GOP refused to support us. But you could see the effect, and the left certainly saw the effect of the right-wing blogosphere in the 2004 election. Because had it not been for the right-wing blogosphere, that ruse that Dan Rather, the gold standard of journalism, right? CBS, the gold standard of journalism, that ruse with the fake documents of George Bush's national service record, where they tried to gin up some controversy about he was not supposed to be there on Thursday, but he got there on Tuesday. This is what passed for journalism. And it had legs. It had legs. I mean, understand, this is his national service record. This is the kind of documentation that Bush provided. Obama, nothing. We can't even see the long form, but we won't go there, okay? But the point is, we exposed that fraud, that document fraud, and it turned the election. And the left got hit very fast. And so I would say that the left now certainly has a leg up on the right-wing blogosphere. So what they need to do is they need to destroy those of us in the right-wing blogosphere who are making a difference. Now, even the right-wing blogosphere, okay, stays away from this subject. It is so toxic that, I mean, look, you could be a murderer in America, okay? But to be a racist, to be called a racist, is absolutely and positively unforgivable. And the pity and the crime here, of course, is that real racism is absolutely horrible. And yet to be called a racist because you're opposing the most radical and extreme ideology on the face of the earth, when in fact Islam is not a race. There are Muslims that are red, green, brown, blonde, whatever, okay? It is an ideology that suppresses, and certainly racism against, Jews and Hindus and so on and so forth. I mean, look, I don't even look at it anymore. I tell the level of my success by the level of hate that's being driven my way by the media and by the elites, certainly not by the people. My email box every day is from ordinary people thanking me profusely for doing what I'm doing. So I will tell you, there is a complete break, a complete psychic break, a complete, clearly intellectual break between the people and the elite. And never was it so pronounced as it is in America, because America was always a country, of the people, by the people, for the people. But the elite thinks it has taken over. But I think they're in for a rude awakening. I really do believe that, Robert. I believe we're approaching a tipping point. And I think that's why the attacks on you and the attacks on me are so fierce and so relentless.
Yes, you know what they say, you're getting the flak when you're over the target. And so I'm aware of that, but I think that it might be useful to discuss some of these things that you are doing and what you're doing them for, and to explain then the reception in the mainstream media that you got as a result. Take, for example, the bus ads leaving Islam that you put up around the country a couple years ago. The bus ad said, leaving Islam, family threatening you, fatwa on your head, and gave a number to contact, or website to contact, to get help and to get put in touch with safe houses. Now, what happened when you tried to place those bus ads in the first place?
Well, understand the context of those bus ads. At the time, I was a very vocal and public advocate for Rifka Barry. Rifka Barry was a Christian convert, a young teenage girl, not so young. She was actually almost turning 18. She was 17. Young Muslim girl who had converted out of Islam 3 or 4 years prior, kept it from her family, but her mosque, her terror-tide mosque, and the Noor Mosque is terror-tide, was spying on her, and called her parents and said, that your daughter converted out of Islam, you better straighten her out, their words. And the father threatened to kill her. So she had run away. She ran away to save her life. And so she appeared in Florida, and I went to Florida to cover the hearings that were being conducted to bring her back to this deadly household. And there was no way we were going to allow that to happen. And so we were very strong public advocates for her. And while I was in Florida, I saw these bus ads proselytizing for Islam. Come to Islam, why Islam? Call 188, why Islam? And I thought, what about the Muslims who are leaving Islam? What are they going to do? Where are they going to go? And so I decided to run this ad. Leaving Islam? Is your family threatening you? Is there a fatwa on your head? And I ran the first series in Florida, and immediately there was a firestorm. CARE, the Council of American Islamic Relations, the Hamas-tied group that was named as a co-conspirator and named as a Muslim Brotherhood group in the largest terrorist funding trial in our nation's history, the Holy Land Foundation trial, got them to take it down, take the bus ads down. Of course, we went to file a lawsuit, and not only were they back up, but an additional 10 buses were added for free. In New York City, when I went to run them, it became not only a national news story, but an international news story. It was in the Daily Mail, it was in the Telegraph, I think France TV, France 24 did a piece on it. That's how infused our culture is with the Sharia. I was on Fox and I think, was it MSNBC talking about it, and they were, sort of scolding me saying, well, this is offensive to Muslims. I said, really? So if I ran an ad, for battered women, or battered wives, that would be like all the husbands in America saying, hey, this is offensive to husbands. Are we supposed to believe that all Muslims would kill other Muslims that left Islam? So it was a teachable moment. Not only was it, of course, this is the law of unintended consequences when you're fighting the good fight, when you're fighting for freedom. But yes, I got to go on television. Not that was the good thing that I got to go on television, don't miss my point, and say things that people never hear. This was a teachable moment to say, under the Sharia, under Islamic law, leaving Islam is punishable by death, and thousands are murdered in Muslim countries. And are we going to allow this to go on here? It's happening. There are honor killings here in America. Amina and Sarah Saeed, Noor al-Maliki, Jessica Mokdad, Asia Hassan. We're seeing this, and yet the media will not report on it.
And that's really the essence of the problem when it comes to Islamophobia.
Yes.
That the media portrayed this as an anti-Muslim campaign, as an Islamophobic campaign, as a campaign asking people to leave Islam, when actually all you were doing was offering help to people who were legitimately threatened with death for leaving Islam under Islam's death penalty for apostasy. And so when, coming back to the beginning, when Ekmeladin Ihsanolu says that Islamophobia is an irrational fear, it's not irrational to be combating people who are trying to kill other people for leaving Islam at the command of Muhammad, who said, if anybody changes his religion, kill him. Anyway, we have come to the end of our first segment. We're going to take a small break, and we'll be right back after this.
If you'd like to support ABN's ministry, you can give us a call at 248-416-1300, or you can visit our website at www.abnsat.com. ABN appreciates your support and donations.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're back. Welcome back again to Jihad Watch. I am Robert Spencer, and tonight's Islamophobia extravaganza, we are talking with the great Pamela Geller, live from New York, and we are discussing the phenomenon of Islamophobia. In the first segment, we discussed how it was invented by the Muslim Brotherhood in order to intimidate people into being afraid of resisting jihad. And I quoted a bit from Ekmeleddin Ihsanolu, the Secretary General of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. And I have a bit more to say from him to give him his due. He says, for example, that there is a fringe minority of Muslim extremists, and their twisted logic is trying to spread violence against non-Muslims and Muslims alike. Now, when people ask about the problem of so-called Islamophobia, they generally equate it with this alleged fringe minority of Muslim extremists. And so, for example, let's just take the last few years in the United States. For Islamic jihad plotters and attackers, we have, among many others, we have Nasser Abdo, who was the would-be second Fort Hood jihad mass murderer. We have Khalid al-Dasadi, who tried to commit jihad mass murder in Lubbock, Texas. We have Mohammed Hussein, who was a would-be jihad bomber in Baltimore, Maryland. Mohammed Mohamud, who was a would-be jihad bomber at the Christmas tree lighting ceremony in Portland, Oregon. We have, of course, Nidal Malik Hassan, the army psychiatrist, who murdered 13 Americans in cold blood at Fort Hood in the name of Islam and jihad. We have Faisal Shahzad, who was the would-be Times Square jihad mass murderer, who, if his car bomb had gone off, thousands of people would have been killed in the heart of New York City. We have Abdul Hakim Mujahid Muhammad, formerly known as Carlos Bledsoe, who murdered two American servicemen outside an Arkansas military recruiting station in the name of jihad. We have Naveed Haq, who entered the Jewish Community Center in Seattle and murdered several people there a few years ago. We have Mohammed Reza Tahiri Azhar, who was a Muslim student at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, my own alma mater, who read the Quran, discovered that it was telling him to wage war against unbelievers, rented an SUV, plowed it through the middle of campus, trying to run down as many students as possible. He didn't kill anyone, thank God, but he injured 9. We have Ahmed Ferhani and Mohammed Mamdouh, who hatched a jihad plot to blow up a Manhattan synagogue. And we have, of course, Umar Farouk Abdul Mutallab, the Christmas underwear bomber, over Detroit, Michigan, several years back. Now, in contrast to that, people who say Islamophobia is actually a bigger problem, such as Brian Levin, who is a professor who wrote at Huffington Post the other day that the real terror threat to the United States from a very small group of people who have twisted and hijacked Islam is actually far outweighed by the problem of Islamophobia, which he said threatens American values and national security. The only problem is you can't hold up any similar list, any list comparable to the one I just read out, of so-called Islamophobes committing violence against Muslims. Now, there have been several incidents that were widely reported. One, for example, was in New Jersey several years back when a man and his newlywed wife, they were walking along the street and were shot at by people, his wife was shot dead by people who he said were yelling anti-Muslim Islamophobic slogans. And of course, I was blamed for this, Pamela was blamed for this, and then it came out that the man actually had staged the whole thing in order to murder his own wife. And likewise, there was the case of Shema Al-Wadi in California several months ago, still unsolved case. Once again, there was allegedly a note left by the body when she was murdered, again containing Islamophobic slogans, but the whole thing was a hoax. And that part of it, even though the murder is still unsolved, has been exposed. And so, Pamela, are you still with us?
I'm listening. I'm hanging on your every word.
Well, I wanted to ask you, in light of all this, is there any actual Islamophobia? Ekmeleddin Ihsanolu and so many others charge that Muslims face rampant discrimination and hate crimes in the United States. Is this true?
No, but there's a complete disconnect between the truth and the narrative. I mean, we're living in an era of the big giant lie, which was very effective also, if you recall, during the lead up to the Holocaust. You must have the big lie. You must club the American people's psyche to death with it, and that's what they're doing. Many times we see that these Muslim hate crimes are perpetrated by Muslims. The faked hate to give the thing some legs. I guess I can't begin to understand the psyche that would do anything even remotely like that. And it's interesting, the case that you bring up in California, how we were bombarded, if you recall, Robert, with, an enormous media slam because of a note left behind. Nothing had been vetted. No one had, the case had not been investigated at all. It said something like, terrorists, go back to your country. Very inventive, I must say. And it turns out, of course, as we know, and as you just described, it was the family. And you never hear anything. You never hear anything about that case again. It's the Muslim victimhood myth. And it is drummed into the not only the American psyche, but the psyche of the West. In order, it lays the groundwork, you see. It lays the groundwork to impose Islam and to demonize those of us that are speaking the truth.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
People call us. I'm sure you get this too. What people have been saying lately to me when I do certain shows, you're a prophet, and you called it on Egypt, and you called it. I'm not a prophet, okay? Nothing of the kind. It was there. Obama had invited the Muslim Brotherhood in June 2009. His mid-level cabinet officials were meeting with the Muslim Brotherhood. What happened in Egypt was not an accident. The abandonment of religious minorities by the Obama administration. You and I have been writing about this for months. We've been writing about how Dalia Mogahed, an advisor to the Obama administration, the president of one of the leading Muslim Brotherhood groups in this country, the Islamic Society of North America, was blocking the Coptic Christians from speaking or getting into the White House. And I have to say that I applaud the leaders of the Coptic community that refused to meet with Hillary. I don't know if they realized how effective that move would be. I think they just didn't want to give sanction to her lie. But I don't think anybody would have reported on them meeting with her, when in fact, the fact that they refused to meet with her, and they're so desperate. I mean, they're in such dire straits. It was a very, a desperate move not to meet, but they wouldn't give sanction to the, frankly, evil policy of the Obama administration. And the abandonment of freedom is evil. The abandonment of good is evil. And so, I have to say that what's it going to take? What's going to be the big wake-up call at this point? Look, I got to say, if 9/11 wasn't a big enough wake-up call, I don't know, Robert.
Yeah. I understand entirely. But you touch on something very important there in speaking about the Coptic Christians in Egypt and the plight that they are suffering under now with the Muslim Brotherhood regime there and their protests against Hillary recently, saying if you like the Ikhwan so much, then take them back to the U.S. with you. And of course, I thought that was ironic when I saw those protest signs because, of course, she's doing just that. As we know from the extensive Muslim Brotherhood infiltration in the U.S. government, which is such a matter of controversy nowadays, over Michelle Bachmann and so on. But in any case, the thing is that the problems that the Coptic Christians are facing in Egypt, that Christians in Iraq are facing, that Christians all over the Middle East are facing, it's really a byproduct of this whole Islamophobia big lie, that people who are genuinely suffering from hatred and bigotry, that is, people who are victims of Islamic intolerance, people who are victims of Islam's institutionalized subjugation of non-Muslims in the Islamic State, they are shunted aside. And the United Nations and the Obama administration and the governments of Western Europe, they're all focused on Islamophobia, this phantom problem instead. We want to hear from you, especially if you think that Islamophobia is a real problem and that we're giving it short shrift. Give us a call, 248-416-1300. That number again, 248-416-1300. Give us a call. We'll hear you out and we'll tell you the truth, no matter how much it may sting. But in the meantime, Pamela Geller is with us, and Pamela, also, there was another initiative that I wanted to ask you about that you undertook recently, and that was in Southern California, in Manhattan Beach, the Summer Night for Human Rights. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I would. Can I just refer to something that you just discussed?
Of course.
I don't want to, screw up your segments here. But Islamophobia is the Sharia. The galloping Islamization of the Middle East and of North Africa and of Europe is, the resurrection of the, the mission to, install the universal caliphate. Islamophobia is the Sharia. It is imposing the Sharia. The Sharia says you cannot criticize, you cannot insult Islam. And it should have absolutely no place in freedom-loving societies. And the fact that it does, to me, speaks to a much larger problem, and that is a lack of civilizational self-esteem in the West, a lack of civilizational spine, and the receding of the influence of the West. I mean, Islam has been on an imperialistic campaign, and a brutal and bloody one, for 1,400 years. Clearly, the defeat of the Ottoman Empire at the turn of the 20th century, I think, was the defeat of Islam and the rise of the West. Finally, the true rise of the West. It was the West that resurrected this ideology by the largest transfer of human wealth, of wealth in human history, via the petrodollar. We resurrected Islam. It is up to us to, to defeat the ideology that oppresses non-Muslims and women, persecutes and slaughters. I mean, it is up to us. This is not going to go. You're not going to rationalize this away. This is irrational because we know that it's a complete system. It's not only religion, but it's a legal and political and dietary and social and cultural system that asserts authority over non-Muslims, unlike Jewish law, which is for Jews, and canon law, which is for Catholics, and so on. This asserts authority over non-Muslims. We are responsible. I mean, freedom is not free, and freedom is a precious thing. And we are responsible to our children and to our future generations and all freedom-loving peoples to fight for the damn thing,
Yes. Would you say that when Dahlia Mogahed, Obama's Muslim advisor, wearing the hijab, turned away those Coptic Christians who had wanted to speak to Obama about trying to get some American help for the Coptic Christians in Egypt, would you say that she turned them away precisely out of this imperative that one must not offend Islam? That it would have offended Islam to speak about Islam's persecution of non-Muslims in Egypt?
I think that she turned them away because she's a good Muslim. I think she turned them away because she was adhering to Islam. I think that's why she turned them away. I think she turned them away because I do not believe that Dahlia Mogahed, is allegiance is to the Constitution. I believe her allegiance is to the Quran.
Well, she did defend Sharia. She defended and spoke positively about Islamic law on a television show actually sponsored by the radical pro-Sharia group Hizb ut-Tahrir, which is banned in many countries.
Yes.
But they run a TV show in Britain, and she appeared on this show and spoke very positively about Islamic law. It's hard to think that she would reject the part of Islamic law that forbids non-Muslims to criticize Islam and the part of Islamic law that institutionalizes discrimination against non-Muslims in the Islamic State.
Yeah, and as Imam Rauf said, you cannot cherry pick the Sharia. And so, I mean, it would be against the Sharia for her to cherry pick the Sharia. And I don't believe she would do that. I believe she is a stealth jihadist. And so she's doing what she is commanded to do. It is up to us, and this is why, you and I, call attention to this so fiercely, that those 300 Muslim Brotherhood groups that were named as unindicted co-conspirators, as Muslim Brotherhood proxies in the United States, those prosecutions were scuttled by Obama's Department of Justice, despite a, quote, mountain of evidence against these groups.
Yes,
Now,
yes.
yes, I mean, it is our job to defend our Constitution, and it is also our job, as the leader of the free world, to align with other freedom-loving democracies. And Obama has an anti-freedom policy.
Absolutely.
You cannot for 1 second say, if someone does something off course once or off course twice, you could make a case that, well, they didn't see the forest for the trees, although I have difficulty believing that, because you and I are on the outside, we're researching, we're opining, we're studying, but these people are inside, and they have inside information we don't have. I mean, where is the statecraft? Where is the statecraft behind installing the Muslim Brotherhood? What's that going to look like in 10 years and 20 years? That's what the State Department is supposed to be doing. That's what statecraft is. I mean,
it's hard not to escape the conclusion. It's hard to escape the conclusion, rather, that Obama thinks that Islamic states are just grand and wants to see more of them.
Yes.
This is whether or not, quite aside from the question of whether he's secretly a Muslim and all that business, he's done everything he can to aid and support the Islamic Republic of Iran against the demonstrators there, as you pointed out in the post-American presidency and before that on atlasshrugs.com. And yet he has aided the establishment of Islamic states in Tunisia, in Libya, in Egypt, where there had been relatively secular regimes before this. Well, not so much with Gaddafi, but he was a different case. Now, the thing is, he's not a stupid man. He must, therefore, think that an Islamic state is a positive thing for society. In any case, I did want to ask you about the Summer Night for Human Rights, and we'll get back to that, but I understand that we have a few callers, and so if we can do it, let's go to our first call. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, hello.
Hello?
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I want to tell you some news. You both will be happy to hear it. I
Yes.
just heard it today. There is a priest in some place in the United States. His father is a priest in some place in Egypt. His father told him, since Morsi took the presidency, he gave communion to 500 persons. And this is one church. I don't know what's happening all around the country.
Do you mean you're saying that people are converting to Christianity in Egypt after
Yes,
Morsi
yes.
became president?
Yes.
Oh, that's fascinating.
That's one priest saying that 500... Say it again?
Yes. Hello?
Yes, 500 persons in one church. How about the rest of the country?
Yeah, it sounds like a mass suicide mission.
if you call it this way. So,
Well, I hope not, but that's a fascinating thing. You think that that's because people understand what Islamic law involves, and so they are opting out of Islam entirely when they see Islamic law coming to Egypt now?
Yes, everything. They knew something about Islam now. And all the stations here, you and one of them also, they hear you and they listen to you. They know what you're saying. Especially the program you have about Jesus and Muhammad. I love that very much. So they hear from everybody. Now they they are afraid from Islam.
Well, yes, that's real Islamophobia. That's the Islamophobia that's genuine, that is a reaction to a genuine physical threat. And certainly we hope and pray that all those people, the new converts, will be safe in Egypt. The situation for Christians there is growing very dire, and they deserve everyone's prayers and support. But thank you so much for calling. That is very encouraging.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And you were talking about Obama. You said he is a Muslim.
Well,
he is a gang leader. You said
a gang
he's smart.
leader?
You said he's smart. He's a gang leader. He does not have a religion, and Hillary Clinton does not have a religion. She's a Scientologist, something like that. And that country is going down anyway.
Yes.
I hope not. I
I-
hope
I-
not.
Unfortunately, I think you have a point there.
I would like to
Yes,
say,
because when he said that this country is not a Christian country, it's a Muslim and Christian and Jewish. At that time, when they said that this country is Christian, we have Christian and Jewish and Muslim in this country, and they said this country is a Christian country. Now he's saying it's not a Christian country because it has Jewish and Muslim. All the time it has Jewish and Muslim, but now he want to say it's
Countries
not a
in the
Christian
world.
country.
Pamela, you were saying.
I just would like to say, in all seriousness, I know I said it sounds like a mass suicide mission, but in all seriousness, I really fear for the Christians, the Coptic Christians in Egypt. I really fear the Christians in Syria and the Alawites as well. I think there's going to be, if Assad, listen, there's no good guys here, okay? But Assad did protect the Christians. He did. And it's 10% of the population, and I believe there's going to be a mass bloodbath. And it's not just the Muslim countries that Obama sides with. He sides with evil every time. I mean, if it's not, against the freedom-loving peoples of Iran, and with the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, the Honduras, he was siding with Chavez. In Eastern Europe, he abandoned our allies and made a fool of himself for Russia. And it's every time. So it's a consistent anti-freedom foreign policy. I think that really needs to be pointed out. It's not accidental. We need to discuss it, and frequently, because the media is covering up, like the Goebbels media in Nazi Germany. It's the same big giant lies told over and over again until people start to believe it. And they do believe it, because let me tell you something. There's no reason why the Obama race should be a dead heat. And there's certainly no reason why 65% of our young people support Obama. I mean, the young, you would think they love freedom, and they love freedom of thought and freedom of intellectual diversity, and there's none of that. They're like bots. They're like soldiers. And so it's very important what ABN is doing, and I salute ABN for giving you a show, Robert, which goes to show that they're more astute than I even gave them credit for. But it's up to us, and I know that it's David and Goliath, but, David didn't fare too badly.
Yes.
This is why we have to do what we're doing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, it's interesting what you say about the Goebbels media and the big lie, and people repeating the big lie often enough until the public believes it. I think this is what's going on with the concept of Islamophobia. And one of the things that the Islamophobia theme constantly harps on is the idea that there is an Islamophobia industry, that we are some small coterie of well-financed and very wealthy people who are doing this for nefarious reasons. If there's any industry in this and anybody making money, it's the people who are pushing the concept of Islamophobia itself. And you touched on before the fake hate crimes, and we talked about Shema al-Wadi and some of the others. And if there's any industry here, it's the fake hate crime industry. Actually, there's an incredible extension of Muslims faking hate crimes, crimes against mosques that turn out to have been perpetrated by the people in the mosques themselves, Muslims reporting hate crimes that turn out to be nothing. There is an article that I can refer people to called CARE's Hate Crimes Nonsense, which shows how the Hamas-linked Muslim Brotherhood front group, the Council on American Islamic Relations, has published fake hate crimes, crimes that were turned out to be set by Muslims themselves, arson attacks on Muslim businesses that turned out to have been set by the Muslim owners of the businesses in order to get the insurance money, listed as hate crimes in CARE's report, and so on. And this is because the Islamophobia idea needs hate crimes. They need to portray Muslims as victims. They need to portray Muslims as being discriminated against, as being targeted by violence, targeted by hate in the United States in order to get their big lie over, when actually Muslims in the United States enjoy more freedoms and are subject to less physical intimidation and any kind of harassment than they are anywhere in the Islamic world, because this is still, at least for the moment, a free country. Anyway, I understand we have another caller. Shall we go to the next caller, please?
Yeah, good evening, Pamela, Robert.
Thanks for calling. Welcome to Islamophobia Palooza.
I know that it's a legal age in Iran, I believe, that the marriage age is 9. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
So that's crazy. And there's a new law that I believe that was passed in Pakistan about if you speak against Muhammad's 9-year-old wife, I believe it's a crime. Is that
Yes,
true?
that's also correct. Yes.
Wow. So our children are not even safe.
No, certainly not. I mean, the flip side of Islamophobia is that we have to accept Islamic law. And as Pamela noted about Imam Rauf, the famous Ground Zero Mosque Imam, Faisal Abdul Rauf, he said just the other day on the Michael Koren show that Sharia, Islamic law, cannot be subdivided. It cannot be segmented. It's all or nothing. And so part of Islamic law is that children can, that is, girls, can be married off. Muhammad married a 9-year-old when he was 54, and because he is the excellent example of conduct according to the Quran, chapter 33, verse 21, his example is paramount and to be followed in all things. And so child marriage is rampant in the Islamic world, and this creates many human rights abuses. Pamela, you've done some work on these kinds of things and on women's rights in Islam in general. Can you expand on some of that?
Well, the gentleman who says so our children aren't safe, he couldn't be more right. One only needs to look at a country in the West that is further along in the Islamization process, like the UK, and the recent spate of absolutely heinous child sex trafficking crimes and Muslim gangs of men, and I'm talking scores and scores of men that have been trafficking in girls as young as 11, grooming them for prostitution, raping them repeatedly over periods of years. And some of the details, I won't do it, this is a family show, I won't speak of it on this particular show, but are just unimaginable sex crimes against children. And as you have, cited a chapter and verse on this, sex slaves are permitted, under Islam, in the Quran. And so this is what we see increasingly in, countries, Western countries where there are larger and larger Muslim populations. Look at the rapes in Norway and in Sweden, always against non-Muslims, by Muslim men, almost exclusively. And of course, the media, once again, will not speak of it as to motive. It's either, it's a Moroccan or a North African or a Somalian. It's always geography, as if geography is as relevant as the color of their socks. They all share the same ideology. And this is what I think is missing. This is the key component missing from any of the reportage on any of these Islamic crimes. Clearly, as you brought up in the Fort Hood Jihadi, this was jihad. And when we look at the recently released Webster Commission report, it is shocking. The objective of the report is to scrub Islam from the Fort Hood Jihad and to somehow, remove the fact that he was wearing the garb of the Shaheed, he was screaming Allah Akbar, my God is greater than your God, while he was mowing down our soldiers on the largest attack on a U.S. military base in our nation's history. He came out on Grand Rounds. I actually post his presentation that he made on jihad because it's a very succinct, spot-on presentation on jihad. And yet the objective of the report was to disarm the American people, to intellectually disarm the American people, intellectually disarm the Department of Defense and our military as to who the enemy is, what motivates the enemy, and what their intent is. And their intent is to eliminate and destroy Western civilization from within and sabotage its miserable house. It's shocking.
Now, of course, you're quoting from a captured internal document of the Muslim Brotherhood outlining its strategic goals for the United States that was released during the Holy Land Foundation Hamas funding trial in 2007. and it said that the goal of the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States is eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands, that is, the Muslim brothers, and the hands of the believers, so that it falls and Allah's religion is victorious over other religions. Now, all this ties together because the Muslim Brotherhood, being the chief exponent of the concept of Islamophobia, along with the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, headed by Isanolu, the Muslim Brotherhood, operating by means of its proxies in the United States, the Muslim American Society, the Islamic Society of North America, the International Institute of Islamic Thought, where the concept of Islamophobia was invented, the Council on American Islamic Relations, and so on. They are pushing this idea that it is offensive to Muslims, that it makes them liable to discrimination and to attacks of hatred and bigotry and so on, if people speak honestly about Islamic Jihad. The Fort Hood attack, as you so outlined it in such eloquent detail just now, is a prime example of this, that here is a clear Islamic jihadi who is shouting Allahu Akbar as he kills Americans. He was handing out Qurans on the day of his attack. As you uncovered, he has Soldier of Allah printed on his business card. He gave jihad talks, the jihad talk that you have posted at Atlas Shrugs and so on, when he was supposed to be giving talks on psychiatry, by the way. And yet the Webster report and the official government report before it both make no mention of Islam or jihad. They completely whitewash the causes of it, because to do otherwise would be Islamophobic. And that shows that the idea of Islamophobia actually kills. It costs lives. The Islamophobia industry accuses us of endangering people when actually we have never counseled violence and are only speaking out in defense of human rights, of the freedom of speech, of the freedom of conscience, of the equality of rights of women with men, of the equality of rights of non-Muslims with Muslims, and so on, and have never called for any kind of violence. But the whole idea of Islamophobia in explaining away, downplaying, outright denying the genuine jihad threat, which can be and often is violent, that is endangering people. This kind of mistaken and false analysis is putting more Americans in the line of fire. And for that, history will judge the purveyors of the concept of Islamophobia very harshly. Please give us a call, 248-416-1300. Do we have another call waiting or no?
Robert, if I may quote my latest...
Yes,
go
ahead, Pamela.
If I may quote my latest ad that's going up, if I may quote my latest ad that's going up in Metro North opposite the anti-Israel ads that are running, it's not Islamophobia, it's Islamo-realism.
That's right. Islamo-realism is speaking the truth about Islam. The truth about Islam can be harsh, because Islam does teach violence against unbelievers. It does teach the death penalty for apostasy and so on. But if we do not speak about these things, then more people are going to be victimized. The Jews in Israel are going to be subject to continued jihad. The Christians in the Middle East are going to be subject to continued jihad. Non-Muslims all over the world will be threatened by this unless we identify the problem and stand up and resist it. So I understand we do have some more callers. Let's go to the next call.
Yes.
Hello?
Hi. Yeah, this is Liz Wagner.
Hi, Liz.
I
Welcome to the Islamophobia Palooza.
Thank you so much. I wanted to just say I thought it was fantastic that that Pamela is doing a response to those ads up here in Westchester. I live there, and they've been killing me, those ads. But my real point for calling is I wanted to get back to Dahlia Mogahed.
Yes.
To say that in addition to her just doing her Muslim thing, she does not want the cops to get in to speak with anybody at the White House, because she doesn't want to risk the cops stealing the victim spotlight. This would be very dangerous if there were another group that was being victimized by the Muslims.
Yes, that's an excellent point. That's a very important point, because the whole idea of Islamophobia is to portray Muslims as victims to deflect attention away from jihad and Islamic supremacism.
Exactly, and
Yes, absolutely. Well said. Pamela,
Yeah.
the ads that Liz mentioned, can you explain what's going on with those ads?
Well, there are two ads that are going up. Let me thank you, Liz, so much for calling, and thank you for appreciating the rather difficult battle in getting pro-Israel ads up and running. The first set of pro-Israel ads was submitted in September of 2011 after anti-Israel ads were running in the New York City subway system, urging the U.S. to to end aid to Israel, as if aid to Israel was an impediment to peace. And the ad that I had submitted at the time was, in any war between the civilized man and the savage, side with the civilized man, support Israel, defeat Jihad. And for the first time in 15 years, ads were rejected by the New York City MTA. It's a long story. It was a long battle. Of course, I sued as a violation of my freedom of speech. The New York City transit system is choosing to run political ads. Once they do that, they can't choose which political message they like and which they don't like. Because the First Amendment, not the 8th, not the 10th, not the 12th, the First Amendment, and it's first for a reason, is freedom of speech. And the most protected speech under the First Amendment is political speech. And the judge ruled with me down the line as it being core political speech. So those ads will be going up. Where the caller Liz is referring to is a second set and different set of anti-Israel ads, one incredibly fallacious, went up on Metro North, the train stations in Westchester. It shows, again, the Islamic Jew hatred narrative of Israel, of Palestine getting smaller and smaller as the Jews, ate it up. And the only thing missing is a Jew with bloody fangs. And it talks about 5 million, close to 5 million, quote unquote, Palestinian refugees, of course, with which there's no such thing. That's a narrative that the godfather of modern terror, Yasser Arafat, created in '67, when in fact, the map of quote unquote Palestine is missing 88% of it. 88% of Palestine is in Jordan. So I created another ad that's going up, and that ad says it has a very large 19,250, and that number changes every day. 19,250, and then it says deadly Islamic attacks since 9/11. It's not Islamophobia, it's Islamorealism. That's going up. That ad has been submitted. That contract has been signed. They're being printed as we speak. They should be up by August 4th. Liz, if you can get a picture and send it to me, I would be eternally grateful.
Thank you. We have another caller?
Yeah, hi guys. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, hello?
Hi there, calling from Toronto, Canada. First off, I would just like to say I'm a longtime reader of Jihad Watch and Atlas Shrugs. I think you guys do a fantastic service with the articles and commentary that you put up there on a regular basis. So I'd like to thank you very much. What I'd like to ask, because of the views that you guys hold now, this is obviously not a popular opinion with the mainstream media. There comes a certain risk, and I know, Robert, you put up letters of death threats that you get from time to time. What I'd like to know is, how has this affected your life on a personal level? Do you find that you're not able to walk freely? And what kind of sacrifices have you and Pamela had to make as a result of the truthful opinions and positions that you guys take on the matter of jihad and Islamic supremacism?
Pamela?
Well, first of all, I have a file of death threats, but I want the gentleman to understand that the idea of doing nothing is far scarier to me. So there's no choice. Once you know, I mean, there are people that don't know, but once you know and you do nothing, then you're as guilty. You're aiding and abetting because silence is sanctioned. Clearly, it caused a great deal of change in one's personal life, and not only that, but from our organizational point of view, our single largest expense, and you can see that we do things. We're one of the few organizations that are really on the ground doing things. The rallies where we had tens of thousands at Ground Zero, the the taxi campaigns, of the faces of the girls who had been honor murdered in the United States, and of course, Muslim cab drivers actually removing those ads, the bus ads. But our single largest expense is security, because every time we speak, there are threats, there are agitators. Without the guns that are on our sides and in the audience and you walking around, we would not be able to speak freely. The enemy doesn't have that. The enemy is not threatened. And what's interesting to me is that Robert and I mean, I can't imagine how many Robert get, but the hundreds of death threats that we get never, ever is reported on. And we run them. We run the tweets, we run the emails, we run the letters. But when Imam Rauf, the ground zero radical Rauf Imam, said that he was threatened, no, he didn't show a letter, didn't show an email, didn't, the media was running stories after stories. And this so much so that even the Huffington Post, or the Puff Hose, as I like to call them, actually did an article on that one threat that was gotten allegedly by him, unsubstantiated, 2 years ago, just did a whole article on it last week. So you could see how uneven-handed the whole thing is. But I know that, you have to understand, I know that I'm right. I know that what I'm doing is righteous. I know that it's good. And so while I'm not reckless and I'm not feckless and I don't take stupid chances, I know that I'm protected. I know that. Robert?
Well, I can actually quote Pamela Geller in something that I've heard you say many times, and we've spoken together at places. You say that in America, they won't necessarily assassinate you, but they'll assassinate your character. And I think that that's a very important point, that the violent threats that we get, the threats of people who say they're going to kill us, it all goes hand in hand with the charges of Islamophobia, racism, and bigotry. They're trying to destroy us either way. They're saying, we'll kill you, and even if we don't kill you, we will destroy you. We will assassinate your character. We will make it so that people don't want to have anything to do with you. We will make you radioactive in the public square, and so on. And if we don't do that, there's always the threat of violence. And if there's no threat of violence, there's always the smears and the defamation. And so they work together. But I can say to the caller that I've always said many times that it's not as if I stopped doing this work tomorrow that I would be immortal. And you never know what might happen, but I'm not really concerned about it. Sometimes there have been some things that are unnerving. Certainly, yes, as Pamela says, we have to pay thousands of dollars in security costs when we hold public events. But even when I am just on my own privately, recently I was in a major city and I was riding in a cab, and I wasn't paying any attention, but it was a Muslim cab driver, and when we got to my hotel, he turned around and he said, "Can I ask you a question?" And I thought he was going to ask me about my luggage or something, and he said, "Have you ever actually read the Quran?" And then I realized that he had recognized me and he was angry with my books and so on. And of course, I've read the Quran far many more times probably than he has, but the point is that it was a bit unnerving. And certainly if it had been one of his bloodier-minded co-religionists like Yasser Saeed, who was a cab driver who murdered his 2 daughters in an honor killing several years back, then I might not be sitting here talking to you now. But, you never know what might happen, and nobody has the next moment guaranteed. It's most important just to do the right thing, to speak the truth, and everybody dies, but we can die with integrity at very least. So, we have another caller, or is that it for now? Please call in. Yes, there is.
Yes. This is a wonderful program, outstanding, actually.
Thank you.
I agree 1,000% of what's been said between the two, you and Pamela.
Thank you.
There are 3 quick points. The first one, I don't understand what makes it so attractive to the administration to be in bed with the Muslims, with the Arabs, that Obama handed all the Christians and all the minorities in the Middle East, he handed the entire Middle East to the Muslim Brotherhood. What do they see attractive about Islam? The second point is Islam should be declassify it from being a religion. It is not a religion at all. How can they say it is a religion and it promotes everything inhumane for the entire world? The third point, which is in Egypt, they said after the Friday prayers, they say any woman will be seen walking in the street without hijab covering her head will be sprayed with acid in her face. They said also they stopped women and driving their cars in Egypt, and they said, where is your mahram? Mahram, which is, the one that she has to have a man, her father, her husband, her brother. She cannot go out without a man, mahram. What the heck is going on in this country? Please comment on these. Thank you.
Well, Egypt, of course, is being rapidly Islamized. And I would say very briefly about the second point that I understand what you're saying. Islam, though, it really depends on your definition of what a religion is. And some people think that a religion is something that is by definition good and benign. And in that case, you're right. But if you define religion as being something that relates human beings to God or claims to relate human beings to the divine, then Islam is certainly a religion. But of course, it's much more than that. It's a political and social system, and one that asserts authority over non-Muslims. And that's where it becomes a matter of concern. But as to the first point, I was hoping that Pamela could address that. Why do you think the administration is so pro-Islam and has handed over the Middle East to the Muslim Brotherhood?
Well, let me say this is part of the reason why my first book, written with Robert, of course, The Post-American Presidency, the Obama Administration's War on America, is such a critical read, because we need to understand the prism in which Obama sees the world, what shapes his worldview. I think it is germane that his alleged father, and if you read his father's immigration file, Barack Hussein Obama Sr., it's very, very dubious if he was actually the father, but we won't get into that. But he was a Muslim. So Obama was technically a Muslim, and his stepfather was a Muslim, and he adopted him, and he was Barry Soetoro, and he changed his name. One only knows when he changed his name, if it was when he came back from Pakistan or what have you. He went to a school where he studied Islam, he studied Quran, he lived in the largest Muslim country from the ages of 6 to 12. I bring this up not to say that he's a Muslim or not, because it's not relevant as much as he's clearly Islamophilic. And whether he is a Muslim or not the question isn't that, it's what would he be doing differently? And the answer to that is nothing. He's Islamophilic. He's Islamo-sympathetic. There's just no question about it. He sides with Islamic supremacism at every turn. Why? I don't know what lurks in his heart. I only care about what he does. And what he's doing is patently wrong, and it's patently un-American, and it's anti-freedom, and it's anti-individual rights. And this is why we have to combat it. This is why we have to defeat him in November. Because if you think he was bad in the first 4 years, and he was terrible, because people don't even begin to understand what just happened. Nothing happens for decades, and decades happen in a day. The terrible, catastrophic consequences of this completely changed world that we're now in, and it is completely changed from 4 years ago. I mean, it's not static, it's fluid. And so we haven't even seen the poisonous fruits from this tsunami, this wave of Islamic supremacism. So my answer to you is, you say, why? Why? Because he's Islamophilic. I mean, you could say, why would any Muslim, once, they have a taste of freedom, why would they continue to choose to live under Islam? Why would mothers hold their daughters down while their aunts cut off their clitorises? I mean, this is a question. This is a belief system. I'm not going to solve that, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and keep a country free and safe and adhere to its constitutional tenets. its founding principles. That's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to work to defeat jihad. And I'm going to work to defeat evil. And I'm going to distinguish between the two. Because this is the problem with the left, where their brain is broken, is their inability to distinguish between good and evil. Now, one can say that's because they're godless. One can say that's because they're secular. I don't believe that. I believe atheists can have a morality. I believe you can still distinguish between good and evil. But the point is that this is where the breakdown really began. Oh, you can't say somebody is evil, or you can't say somebody is good because, maybe they had a troublesome childhood. Whatever ridiculousness these people are engaging in intellectually, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And so that's what's happening, how I see it happening in Egypt. What is criminal is the lack of reportage on the churches being burned in Malaysia, on the Christians being slaughtered in Indonesia, in the oppression of the Coptics in Egypt. So let's say the media made a mistake. Where's the mea culpa? Where's the hey? We were wrong about freedom and democracy and justice in Egypt. Here's what's really happening. The fact that they're not doing that shows me that not only are they wrong, but there's an evil motive there. You cannot look at the heinous inhumanity of what's going down in these countries and then cover it up by not reporting on it.
Absolutely.
That is criminally negligent.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, we're coming toward the end. We have time for one more call. Are you there?
Yes, sir.
Thanks for calling. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for hosting the show. It's been a very big blessing in my life. And I would like to say that thank God for people like you. You have inspired me so much to look things up, to do some research, and don't give up. Don't let people oppress you, because that's the root of all evils, for good men to sit around and do nothing.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely.
I would like to ask you a question, and I have some points here that would support the reason why I have this question. Is if you believe that Islam is going to be the Antichrist faith and government of the world. The reason why I have this question is because there's obviously Sharia law, one world government, obviously. The Bible says that the Antichrist is to come from the land of Persia, which is Afghanistan and Iraq today. So that makes me think that the Antichrist is obviously going to be a Muslim. And because of our war over there, very simple for him to profess peace and unity and to stop bloodshed. The money system, the one world money system, we have the global bank, thanks to the Federal Reserve and the Bilderberg Group that just got passed last year, that is owned by Muslims in Saudi Arabia. They're invested in America with oil and gas and M&Ms and other organizations and corporations. The Bible, I believe, after looking this word up, the Greek word for this is the Bible talking about Islam, the fourth rider of the apocalypse, death. The word translated in the English is transparent, but if you look up the Greek word, it actually means green. And if you look around at Islam, Muhammad's favorite color was green. Their flag is green. A lot of their symbols are decorated with some form or fashion of green.
Wait a minute. You're saying that the word for death in the apocalypse is green? In the Revelation?
Talking about in Revelations, the four riders of apocalypse.
Because in Greek there's a word green and there's a word death, and they're not the same word. So I find it odd that if the name is death, then it wouldn't be translated as green if it were green. You see what I mean? In any case,
right,
I understand what you're saying, and I'm no biblical scholar, but I can tell you that one word of caution, and that is that I don't know how old you are, but I'm 50, and I remember when I was a young man, I would hear about people saying that the Antichrist was the Soviet Union, and this was this, and that was that, and this was this, and they had it all figured out from the scriptures, how the Antichrist was the Soviet Union, and then the Soviet Union fell. And actually, if you go back in history, you can find, going back to the Middle Ages and even before that, people reading the apocalyptic passages of the Old Testament and the New Testament and saying it means this and relating it to the present day, and it turned out not to be. Certainly there are great evils in the world. Certainly there's Antichrist in the world. but I would caution against any facile lining it up with one thing or another, because, well, just because so many people have done that in so many ways in the past, and the mind of God is something that nobody can really encompass. What these passages ultimately mean, I think, will only become clear at the end and the consummation of all things. But thank you very much for calling, and we're getting to the end. Pamela, do you have any closing remarks?
Well, I want to thank you for having me, Robert. It's been a pleasure to be on the show.
Thank you.
Yes, I want to urge people, every single person who's in hearing, of the show, to get involved. This is a critical fight. This is a fight for the good. This is a fight for individual rights. This is a fight for freedom. And this is a country that was based on individual rights. And if history has taught us anything, it's that the individual can change the course of human events. I really believe that. And America is America. There is nobody like us in the world. Yes, we're under siege. Yes, we have been infiltrated. So what? As long as there's one free man fighting for good and fighting for freedom, there's hope. And if we have an army, and we do have an army, we have an army in the American people. The key to this battle is in the information battle space. The key to this battle is in the war of ideas. And they may have the major arsenal, the major weaponry, but we have the will, and we have the good, and we are righteous, and we are right, and we will win. But you have to fight. It's not going to happen by accident. You're going to have to win this war, and I urge everyone to get involved. Thank you, Robert, for having me.
Thank you, Pamela, and that wraps it up. I'm Robert Spencer for Jihad Watch on ABN. Join us again in a few weeks. We'll be back. Thanks for watching.